Donald Trump is going all in on crypto. In his second term, he's making good on his campaign promise to turn the United States into the crypto capital of the planet and a Bitcoin superpower. With big moves on regulation and innovation, it looks like crypto is about to take center stage in America's financial future. So here to discuss is Marty Bent. He's the managing partner of 1031 VC. So Marty, thanks so much for your time once again. What do you make of where we are right now with this crypto landscape in the United States?
Well, Joe Matthew, it is in a much better spot compared to where it was when I last spoke to you, when Biden was still in office. And it seems like right now we're in the process of getting regulatory clarity on a few things. As you mentioned, number one is stable coins. You have the Stable Act and the Genius Act being discussed right now. Second, you have market structure. How are these assets going to be defined? Whether or not they're going to be regulated by the CFTC or the SEC. And then last, but certainly not least, the conversation around the strategic Bitcoin reserve and how the U.S. government is going to accumulate Bitcoin over time.
So, looking at those three things, what do you want to see from the administration moving forward? First off, we do have to double acknowledge what you just said. It's a different universe that we're living in right now. The fact that there is a czar, I was sort of in disbelief. Just these things are actually happening. It was like when Trump went to the conference. So promises made, promises kept, it looks like so far in terms of moving forward. But go through what you want to see in the future from the administration on these fronts.
Well, I think what I care most about as a Bitcoiner specifically, stable coins are certainly interesting. They found product market fit in terms of enabling individuals around the world to access alternative financial rails and access dollar instruments where in places where they don't have bank accounts. But I think the real signal is on the strategic Bitcoin reserve. And I think one thing that I'm looking forward to is that getting enshrined into law. Right now, we have the executive order. And as we've seen with executive orders from administration to administration, they can be rendered moot if the other side of the aisle gets into office in 2028. And so enshrining the strategic Bitcoin reserve into law is my number one priority. And I think the way it's laid out in the Lummis bill is great for two reasons. Number one, it says Bitcoin is an asset worth holding, and we're going to try to accumulate as much as possible in an attempt to defease the national debt, which has gotten out of control. And just as importantly, but not really talked about as much, is the right to self-custody Bitcoin as an individual and be able to use Bitcoin as a day-to-day currency as an individual in a peer-to-peer fashion. So I think those two things, accumulating Bitcoin with the intent of defeasing the national debt, which has gotten out of control, and enshrining the rights of individuals to hold and send Bitcoin without having to use a centralized third party, would be massive for the country.
Yeah, and what do you think, what are the biggest obstacles to that? Do you think both those things are going to be smooth sailing? Does it look like strategic reserve and the actual right to use this stuff is going to happen?
I think so. When it comes to self-custody and being able to use Bitcoin, that would just be enshrining what has already existed in the country to date. People have been using Bitcoin in a peer-to-peer fashion, securing it themselves since the protocol launched in 2009. And under the Biden administration, there were worries that laws were going to be passed that would make it so you would have to use a centralized third party to access Bitcoin. So if the Trump admin is able to enshrine the right to self-custody into law, that would be incredible. And then in terms of the government acquiring a strategic reserve, I think the one thing that is being discussed right now behind the scenes and broadly in the public is how is the government actually going to acquire this Bitcoin? And there are many creative ideas. One that I'm interested in was presented by Andrew Hones from Battery Finance at an event co-hosted by Senator Lummis and the Bitcoin Policy Institute last week, which is this idea of bit bonds, where you can issue longer duration bonds, specifically 10-year bonds, and use a portion of the cash proceeds from those bond sales to buy Bitcoin with 10% of that cash. That allows you to offer a 10-year treasury with a lower yield, which would help Americans in the sense that it would help bring down mortgage costs, auto loan cost, credit card loan cost, and it would help us roll over debt at a lower interest rate so we can begin lowering the interest expense on the debt. So long-winded way of saying, how are we going to acquire it in a way in which taxpayers aren't paying taxes to acquire this Bitcoin? What is a budget neutral fashion to do this? And I think bit bonds is an interesting idea. And then, of course, there are other discussions happening about revaluing the gold that the Treasury holds with the Federal Reserve, potentially selling some land owned by the government to acquire Bitcoin, and other creative ideas. And so I think, again, to reiterate, it is a drastically different landscape compared to where we were when we last spoke last year.
It is absolutely drastically different. I want to know, because you've been in the Bitcoin world for so long, what it was like for you just to go through and see the White House hosting a crypto summit, right? Like guys like Michael Saylor, Brian Armstrong, Brad Garlinghouse, all these guys there just gathering together at the White House to just go through and talk about crypto, and just to do it on the national stage the way that they did. What's that like, just seeing where, Bitcoin has come from to where it is right now?
I mean, it's an incredible breath of fresh air. And to me, it's finally a moment where it's like, okay, sanity has entered the conversation. And it is becoming bipartisan too. At this event I was at last week in DC, Ro Khanna from the Democratic side of the aisle came and he spoke about why he's supporting Bitcoin. I think the way he actually laid it out was very nonchalant and very straight to the point, which is Bitcoin is just technology. And for some reason or another, over the first 15 years of Bitcoin's existence, it has sort of been, and it actually sort of makes sense. It's this nation alien technology that confuses a lot of people. The people that are supportive of Bitcoin and pushing Bitcoin can sometimes be bombastic. However, it is just a technology that the U.S. should be harnessing and leveraging to increase the quality of life for individual Americans and the quality of services provided by the federal government. And again, it's just a breath of fresh air. We're finally at a point where it's okay. We can acknowledge that Bitcoin exists. It's here to stay. With that in mind, how are we going to make sure that American citizens are benefiting from Bitcoin proliferating? And that's the other key point. I think I said this last year. America has the lead when it comes to Bitcoin. The number of businesses focused on Bitcoin starting in the United States is immense. I think we lead the world in terms of business creation here. The amount of Bitcoin held by individual Americans on a per capita basis leads the world. Bitcoin, and we have the most mining hash rate here in the United States borders. Bitcoin is the U.S.'s game to lose. And I think now that we're finally having adult conversations about what this is, how we're integrating it into the economy, and enshrining the rights of individuals to use this technology is long overdue. And it's just incredibly relieving, especially considering the attacks that the industry was getting from the Biden administration.
Yeah, night and day. We talk about this stuff all the time here. But we should have you look into the camera and just explain briefly the reason for the strategic reserve, in your mind and its importance, and also, squash any of the objections out there to it.
Put simply, the strategic reserve, its reason for existence is the U.S. is the most powerful nation in the world, and that nation should be holding the scarcest asset, the best store of value asset that has ever existed. And we have a unique opportunity, considering where Bitcoin is in its adoption phase, to be one of the first to adopt this reserve asset. And that gives you an incredible advantage. There's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin, and those who adopt Bitcoin first are going to benefit the most as it monetizes over time. And going back to the runaway debt, that is why I personally think the government should adopt Bitcoin, is because that debt situation is getting out of hand, and you need to think creatively to solve that long-term debt issue. And I think Bitcoin is literally the only creative solution that exists to defease the debt over time. And I want to be clear, I'm saying all this as a Bitcoiner, and I want to be clear that Bitcoin doesn't need the U.S. government to succeed. It's going to succeed on its own merits. The government can decide to adopt it or not. But I do think if the government's looking at this big problem that it has in terms of the debt, Bitcoin is the only creative solution that can help defease that problem over time.
Yeah, Marty, from conversations that we've had before, I think that we all know that we don't trust the system that the government has put out there. And I know Elon Musk is out there as well. He was actually on Ted Cruz's podcast, The Verdict, dropping bombshells. Let's go ahead and watch that.
I call a magic money computer any computer which can just make money out of thin air. That's magic money.
So how does that work?
It just issues payments.
And you said there's something like 11 of these computers at Treasury that are sending out trillions in payments?
They're mostly at Treasury. Some are, but there's some at HHS, some at, there's one or two at State, there's some at DOD. I think we found now 14 magic money computers.
14, okay.
They just send money out of nothing.
Right, and this is something that we've known to be true, like without knowing the details of everything, as Elon calls them, the magic money computers. Okay, now we know there are 14 of them that have been just going through and performing various tasks over time. It's a crazy world that we live in right now, that we have Elon Musk going on a podcast with Ted Cruz, who is a Bitcoiner as well. He buys some every month, he's told me before in the past, that we get all of this information now. And oh yeah, by the way, everything that we thought was true kind of going on behind the scenes. Okay, yeah, complete validation, Marty.
It is, and this is why Bitcoin exists. Satoshi said this explicitly in the early days when he's still around. Governments and central banks cannot be trusted to manage the currency, because time and time again throughout history, whether it's in ancient times or more recent times, if you have the ability to press the big red button of money creation, it's going to happen. And that's what Bitcoin does. It removes the ability by these central authorities, or anybody for that matter, to press that big red button, that magic money button that existed in 14 computers across different government agencies. And for the longest time, we haven't been able to audit directly as individuals the monetary systems that we're forced to live under until Bitcoin. And so now, in a world in which Bitcoin exists, there is no reason that we need to trust the government with their magic money computers and have a situation where it takes Donald Trump getting into the White House for a second time and bringing Elon with him to go and physically audit what these agencies are doing. Anybody who has the ability to download software on their computer can audit the monetary system whenever they want to via Bitcoin. So it's an incredible innovation, and I couldn't be more excited about where we are today and how this administration is posturing in terms of their willingness and eagerness to embrace Bitcoin.
You love how much the administration is embracing Bitcoin, but now there are others that are also coming along and joining them and the White House. And, you know, we were talking about some of the other stable coins and whatnot earlier, and the other people that were attending the White House Crypto Summit. You're not fans of everyone that was there. I know this for a fact. I've seen you tweet about Brad Garlinghouse and XRP and the like earlier. So you're okay with everybody embracing Bitcoin, just not the rest of the kids in the sandbox.
I'm a fan of free markets. I like free markets, and I would prefer that. I would prefer the ability to compete with the Brad Garlinghouses, the Ripples, the Cardanos, the Solanas, the Ethereums, whatever. I'm happy that they're all getting their time too, because at the end of the day, I do think the merits of Bitcoin stand on their own, and people will come to realize, as many already have. Many people's path to Bitcoin starts with a journey, getting into something like Ripple or Cardano or Ethereum and saying, oh, this is a better Bitcoin. I'm going to get on this because it's cheaper, and I want to ride the wave that Bitcoin did. But ultimately, they come to realize that Bitcoin is completely different from all those other cryptocurrencies, because Bitcoin is unique in the sense that it is truly distributed, truly decentralized, had a quasi-immaculate conception, and every other cryptocurrency that's ever existed since Bitcoin has a founder, a founding team, a corporation above it. And whether it's Ripple, Cardano, Ethereum, Solana, those were all pre-mined altcoins that are enriching the early founders. And over time, people begin to naturally recognize that the dynamics that exist in those markets simply do not exist in Bitcoin. Bitcoin is much fairer, much more open, much more transparent. And while these people are in the White House and they're probably putting bad ideas in the administration's ears, I do think that over time people will recognize that Bitcoin is where the signal is, and we're already beginning to see that in the free market. And this is being expressed in the market cap of Bitcoin compared to every other cryptocurrency, which is beginning to detach.
So you would say with XRP, you would say, look, this is a corporation that exists to make money, no matter what people say about it changing the system.
Yeah, I mean, the Ripple Foundation, they've only ever sold XRP. They created billions of XRP out of the ether, pun intended. And the owners of Ripple have never bought Ripple themselves. They created it and they've only sold it to the market. They do not believe in that. That action tells you that they inherently do not believe in the technology that they're building. They believe it's an incredible liquidity mechanism to dump on retail. And a lot of these other cryptocurrencies, that is what they do. They found an easy money. It's funny because it's a lot of what we're trying to get away from. They found a way to hit a button, create money out of thin air, and then sell it onto unsuspecting retail investors, and that has worked out well for them. And I think they're getting into these rooms in the White House because they have given significant donations to many campaigns and PACs over the years leading up to this new Trump presidency. And that's how the game's played, even though these people are in the rooms with the president and his advisors. Again, I think the merits of Bitcoin compared to everything else are beginning to stand out to such a degree where it is inarguable that it doesn't make sense to really support these things.